All right, now comes the fun stuff. Welcome to part 7 of Up and Running with Power BI for Dynamics 365. We're going to talk a little bit about joining tables and transforming data. Those might sound kind of scary. They don't need to be. What I want to tell you before we get into this very brief walkthrough is if you're really building out Power BI to be a source of self-service reports with the ability to not only use the reports that you design, but for people to design their own reports and those kinds of things, this is where you're probably going to spend most of your time. This and maybe the previous topic of connecting to data will take a little bit of time, but the joining is actually the more time-consuming piece. So basically what we're talking about is getting the data into a format that makes it easy and friendly to use for report design and also for report consumption. The changes you make here are going to change aesthetics like the names of fields and capitalization and things like that so that people see user-friendly titles. And when people drag and drop to create their own reports using the data that you've prepared for them, that data is going to be more understandable. It's going to be in a clearer format. You'll see what I mean in just a second here. We're going to go fast. We're by no means going to be comprehensive. We're just going to do a few quick things to give you the idea of what this is and how it works. So let's jump in. So we are over here in Power BI. If you followed along, by the way, you've now connected to your data from Dynamics 365 so that you're in Power BI, you've made those initial connections, you're back on the main interface here. So as we look at this interface, the next thing we want to do is we want to go down on the left-hand side there. We want to click on the model area. So the model basically means how am I going to model my data? How are these different data tables or entities going to link to each other to show information? So here's a real quick connection we're making. Let's take account ID off of the account field, and we're going to connect that to the account ID on the opportunity field. What does that mean? That basically just means, hey, if I'm on an account and I want to see all the opportunities related to that account, how do I do that? Well, those are joined based on an ID in the account field. Sorry, pause my video for a second there. So you can see that says one on one side, meaning one account, and a star on the other side, meaning many opportunities. One account might have many opportunities associated with it. Now we're going to go over to activity pointer, which in Dynamics means your list of activities. So we're going to grab the owner ID, who owns this activity, and we're going to connect that to the system user ID in the system user table. So again, activity pointer is activities, system user is users. One user can own many activities. Makes sense, right? You have a lot of activities that you own as a user. Now let's also link the opportunity to the user. So let's take the owner of the opportunity and link that to the system user. One user might own many different opportunities in the system. Now back on the activity pointer, regarding object ID, this gets a little bit more intense. But if you remember on activities, regarding object is the thing you regarded it to, right? So I'm on a phone call activity and there's a field that says regarding, and I can regard it to an account or to an opportunity or to something else. So I could have done some very complex joins here to show all the things that that's related to. Right now I'm just doing it to account just to keep it simple, but you might actually do all of those when you do that together. Now, you might have noticed I then clicked the button that says transform data. This allows me to make changes to my data to make it more friendly. Let's start simple. Activity pointer, really unfriendly name for that table. Let's change the name to activities. Much clearer, easier for me to understand. This is not changing your underlying source data. It's just changing how it's presented in Power BI. Activity additional params. What is that? We're never going to use it. Let's remove that column so that users don't need to see that confusing column when they're trying to wade through this to create their own reports. Activity type code. Man, that's a really long, unfriendly, weird name. Let's make that a lot simpler. Let's just call that type. Okay, when I'm looking at activities, type, that makes sense to me. Let's look at all the types that we have in there. Bulk operation, we're never going to report on that. This could even be a security setting you use to say, hey, I don't want users to see this particular piece of data because it's secure. In this case, we just said bulk operation, we're just not going to worry about those types of activities from a reporting standpoint. Now look at all those type names. let's come up with some friendlier names instead of things like incident resolution, task, opportunity close. So look at this. I can even go do search and replace and say find types that are called task, replace them with a checkbox. It's going to go off and do a little bit of work. It's going to do that replacement. And I can replace a couple of others too. And I'm not going to worry about incident or opportunity close because I'm not going to report on those as much as I am the others. But phone call, well shoot, let's replace that with a nice user-friendly phone icon. Now I could have just changed it to phone call as two different words with those properly cased and all of that. I just wanted to kind of show you how we can do some other interesting stuff, even using emojis and stuff like that built right into Windows. So we'll replace one more here. Let's go ahead and replace emails with some icon that vaguely resembles something that looks like an email icon or something like that. And just like that, we'll replace it. And if we scroll down through this, you'll actually see there's some of the ones whose icons got replaced for us. Okay, kind of cool. Now, if you like to have that column with that in it, now you'll be able to do that. So we'll show you that when we design the reports. Now, that actual end date, we don't want a time. That's way more detail than we want. Let's change that to just a date. Nice. That's more how we want that to render when we design our reports. So that's another kind of change we can make. Again, let's go to another entity. We went to the system user entity. Unfriendly name. Let's change that to user. Great. Now let's also go way out here near the end. There's a field called full name. And I just want that field to be named something that looks more attractive in my reports, or when people design the reports, it's easier for them to see it in the list of fields. So let's just change it to full name, but with a space between them and proper capitalization. Again, you are not changing anything about CRM or the underlying data that's stored in CRM. You're only changing data and values here. One last thing, let's remove one more column over here, access mode. We don't need that. But I actually did that because I wanted to point out to you, if you didn't notice, over here, every time you make a change, it's showing up under applied steps. So if I said, oops, I didn't want to make that change, I can just go click X next to applied steps. It's going to undo that change for me. Now when I'm all done with my transformations, I just do save and close essentially. It's going to drop me back to where I was before. That transformations actually opened up a new window, a new user interface. When I save and close it, it's going to kind of go do all the updates for the data, and we're done. Now again, as I said before, this was rapid. This is not nearly everything that you would really probably want to tailor if you're really getting this ready for serious reporting. I just wanted to give you a starting point so you could be aware of the basics.